Ladies and gentlemen, as Professor Paul, dear Martin, already indicated, I'm afraid, one of those super accountants that he mentioned, member of the Review Committee on Higher Education, and one of your former rectors sitting here on the first row, as you know, is a member as well. But we're happy to report that we're still working, and we're still doing our job and trying to make sure that in the weeks to come, our reviews of the profiles of the Dutch universities and the HBO institutions will be offered to the Secretary of State for Higher Education, Mr. Zijlstra. Thank you very much, University of Maastricht, to be allowed to speak here today on the occasion of the opening of your academic year. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be allowed to do so at this very respected university. I have a number of slides, and I have also the big screen there, which I've asked for, but unfortunately, and I have to apologize, I've just been informed that the beamer doesn't work. So I only have these two small screens on which I will try to project a number of slides that will go along with the presentation. Don't worry, many of these slides are so complicated that you, if they are so small, won't be able to see it, but as I said, don't worry, there's nothing important on these slides. I have been given 39 minutes exactly, so I shortened my speech drastically. And that again may also contribute to the difficult understanding of what I'm going to say. There is a more elaborate version of this speech, which is being made available at the website, of course, of the university. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last 2.5 decades or so, there has been a growing appreciation amongst politicians, policymakers, also at the European level, of the way in which international forces have altered the basis of economic development. Your new rector, Luc Soete, has been an important researcher in this field. There is an observable trend in many Western countries towards deindustrialization, increased international outsourcing of traditional industries, and a corresponding governmental concern about how to promote innovation as a principal means for sustaining international competitiveness. In many countries, national innovation policies have begun to shape and supersede traditional higher education and research policies. To better compete in a globalized economy, governments have increasingly focused on knowledge, creativity, innovation. And in this context, Martin Paul just explained this, higher education and research organizations have become important targets for national policymakers. Globalization and this increased focus of national governments on innovation have significant impact on the international higher education landscape. Let me explore 3 major strands of this impact, all of which constitute major challenges to universities and, as I will argue, create an urgent need for universities to strategically develop their so-called institutional profiles. First of all, what I've called here mission overload. As you know, universities are increasingly facing rising expectations. They are expecting to address the world's major problems. For instance, those related to our natural environment, the settlement and movement of people, pandemics, poverty, terrorism, etc. Worldwide, there is a widespread expectation that universities should be able to research an increasingly broad range of problems in an ever-growing holistic fashion and at an accelerated pace. The result is an accumulation of mission elements for universities. They are asked to do everything, often leading to mission overload, which blurs for universities their strategic vision and risks becoming a serious distraction from the university's core businesses. Precisely because of these increasing expectations and challenges, I argue, universities need to reassess and to clarify their missions, carefully defining their institutional profiles, carefully defining who they are and what they want to do, and who they are not and what they don't want to do. A second point, forcing universities to analyze their profiles, is what I've called here global research competition. On a worldwide scale, multinational corporations are increasingly putting an end to their basic research activities. The pressure in a number of industries to quickly secure major revenue streams, income, has led to the scaling back or even closure of industrial basic research laboratories. Instead, international companies are concentrating their research efforts on short-term results and adopting a strategic approach to more basic research, which is increasingly reliant on offshore partnership, academic collaboration with universities, of course, and outsourcing to established networks of scientific expertise, again, universities, but on a worldwide scale. National innovation policies, with their emphasis on the application of new knowledge, encourage universities to participate in these new global research networks. In effect, there even appears to be an increasing competition between nations to make themselves attractive to footloose corporate research and development investments. As a result, universities are confronted with the challenge of selecting and investing in those research fields in which they can compete at a global scale. This often requires risky investments in expensive facilities, laboratories, etc., equipment, and particularly in research teams. Strategic research management has become one of the most important aspects of modern university leadership. Modern university research management implies a clear view of an institution's research strengths and weaknesses, and the courage in a university to select and develop sets of research priorities as a major part of the university profile. University has to know what it wants to do, and it also has to know what it shouldn't do. Thirdly, the need for higher education system diversity. In addition to the creation and application of new knowledge, the other crucial dimension of any national innovation policy is human capital formation. Professor Jo Ritsen has recently addressed this issue during his inaugural address at this university. Higher education organizations are urged to increase participation rates, and particularly the supply of well-trained knowledge workers in the prioritized areas of innovation. This is what your university does, and certainly what it should do. But expanding higher education participation, more student enrollment, requires an increase in the diversity of educational provision in terms of curriculum content and orientation, quality, and also price. We not only need to expand higher education systems, but we especially need to diversify the supply forms of higher education. For universities, the question of increasing the diversity of teaching and learning programs brings us again back to what I've called institutional profiling. The wish to create more diversity for learners implies an incentive for universities to sharpen their educational profiles and to develop them as key strategic tools in positioning their university. Since we have been talking about institutional profiles now for a while, let me briefly discuss what I think they are. I see institutional profiles in higher education as the description of what higher education institutions are and what they want to be. Institutional profiles display what institutions do, how good they are at doing it, and how they compare to other institutions. University profiles can be divided in activity profiles on the one hand and performance profiles on the others. Activity profiles describe the actual activities of an institution in terms of focus, volume, priorities, etc. Activity profiles are descriptive. They map the set of activities that defines the various tasks that the university sets for itself. Performance profiles, on the other hand, show how well a university performs. Performance profiles are evaluative and imply a judgment of the output and the impact of an institution's activities. Generally speaking, a university's profile reflects the dimensions of its mission. Martin Powell just repeated them. These can be the basic dimensions of teaching and learning, research, and knowledge exchange. But the university may also want to emphasize other dimensions, such as international orientation. Your university does so. Or regional engagement. We just heard about it. By providing information about the activities and/or the performances of a university, university profiles serve as transparency instruments. They allow both internal and external actors, including students, but also funders, governments, business and industry, to get to know the institution and to assess it as a potential fit with their own needs and priorities. As transparency tools, university profiles are related to rankings. But in what way are they related? Let me explore for a moment the miraculous ways of academic rankings and university league tables. Nowadays, league tables are all around us. In sports, for instance, there are seasonal league tables for soccer, of course, for baseball, for rugby. There are even lists of the number of times cyclists have won the Tour de France, and they change if they find out about certain things. Since the early part of the 20th century, we now have also league tables in higher education and research. And more recently, we have global university rankings, usually showing Harvard or MIT or Stanford being the best university in the world. But while sporting league tables are well accepted, university rankings and league tables remain hotly debated, and rightly so. Aside from the well-known methodological criticism, which I will skip here today, there is an important epistemological argument why university rankings should be approached with extreme caution. And I briefly like to outline this argument. Since the work by Karl Popper, we know that each and every observation of reality is theory-driven. Every observation of reality is driven by the conceptual framework that we use to address that reality. Sir Karl Popper showed abundantly that these conceptual frameworks act like spectacles, like searchlights, that cannot encompass all of reality, but necessarily highlight only certain aspects of it. All rankings, whether they are in sports or in universities, higher education systems, or in any other field, are made up of selected indicators that imply a conceptual framework behind it to which this reality is addressed. In any ranking, there is always a body in charge of choosing the indicators. In sports, such bodies are recognized official organizations like the FIFA or the UEFA in international soccer. And it is accepted that these bodies, design and redefine the rules of the game, including the indicators for creating the performance rankings of soccer teams in the Europe League, for instance. It's equally understood that these rules and indicators are not derived scientifically. They are artificial and they vary by sport. Rugby and football are different, and it is not possible to say whether the #1 rugby team is a better sports team than the #1 football team. My point is that the rules of university rankings are equally arbitrary, because there is no scientific theory of the best university, not even of quality of higher education. But unlike sports, there are no official bodies accepted in our world as having the authority to define the rules of the game. Nor is there an understanding that different conceptual ranking frameworks, using different indicators, define different competitions, like rugby and soccer, and produce different and incomparable outcomes. There is no understanding, in other words, that the Shanghai ranking of universities, for instance, is a game that is as different from the Times Higher Education ranking as rugby is from football. Equally, there is no understanding that the organization making up a certain set of rules and indicators has no more authority to do so than any other organization would. The current global rankings produce comparisons of university profiles, particularly of university performance profiles. Unfortunately, a large majority of the universities in the world that are included in these rankings are judged on the basis of a profile that can hardly be interpreted as appropriate for them. Current global rankings create comparisons based on the apparent assumption that all universities should be addressed as comprehensive, research-intensive universities with a substantial research volume, in particularly the sciences and medicine. So yes, university rankings have to be approached with extreme caution. Nevertheless, as we all know, these rankings are now reality and they are here to stay. So let us see for a moment what the most prominent global rankings have to say about the performance of the Dutch universities in recent years. And here comes the first table that you probably cannot see. This is the academic ranking of world universities, also known as the Shanghai ranking. The best university, according to this ranking in the Netherlands, is Utrecht, which, according to the Shanghai ranking, scored a position of around 50th over the years out of the best 500 universities in the world. Leiden University comes second, position around 70, and there are another 4 universities in the top 150. The University of Amsterdam, the Free University of Amsterdam, the University of Groningen, and Radboud University Nijmegen. Maastricht University climbed up, as Martin Powell explained, to within the top 300 universities worldwide in the year 2011. The second ranking. This is the Times Higher Education ranking. According to this ranking, the University of Amsterdam was the best Dutch university from the years 2007 to 2009, ranking about 50th among the top 200 worldwide. But after 2010, the Times Higher Education ranking changed its methodology. And then first Eindhoven University of Technology became the best in the Netherlands, and then later in 2011 Utrecht became the best Dutch university. In the Times Higher Education ranking, Maastricht is now 197, just before the University of Twente, by the way, which is in 200th position. However, as I already understood, this university must be very proud and happy to report that according to the Times Higher Education ranking, Maastricht University is in the top 20 of the young universities worldwide, which again shows that indicators matter. A third ranking. This is the so-called QS Top Universities ranking, named after Quacquarelli Simons Limited, which is a company that used to produce the rankings for the Times Higher Education ranking until 2010. But it also now offers its own league tables. According to this ranking, which is similar to the rankings of the Times Higher Education before 2010, the best university of the Netherlands, therefore, is still the University of Amsterdam, while Leiden and Utrecht appear to be fighting for second and third place. In this ranking, Maastricht is ranked about 100th out of the world's best 300 universities, which is quite good, of course. And finally, let me show you a table, again hard to see, I'm afraid, of the so-called Leiden ranking outcomes, the most recent one for the year 2011-2012. This ranking, the Leiden ranking, is a bibliometric impact ranking of approximately 1,000 universities worldwide based on their research publications and their citation data. According to the Leiden ranking, the University of Twente happens to be the greatest research impact producer of all Dutch universities, placed on 64th position worldwide, and Maastricht University is ranked 206th. Ladies and gentlemen, my point is that these different league tables demonstrate the substantial variety in the outcomes of international rankings, which can be attributed primarily to the selection of indicators that are being applied in these rankings. All these rankings appear to be based on the assumption that research is the most important dimension of a university's profile, and that university reputation is driven by research. The university profiles that are implicitly being assessed in these rankings are profiles of large research volumes, especially in the sciences. The current global rankings largely project a one-dimensional image of a university, and it assumes that that image shows us a world-class university perspective. I'm afraid that this image lures institutions that take these rankings seriously, and I'm also afraid that many more do so than say so, lures them into imitative behavior, academic drift, and unfortunately, as has been shown, also manipulation of their actual performances. There is another way. The other way to analyze university profiles is, rather than taking a specific ideal type as the base for comparing a variety of profiles and concluding that those universities lacking the ideal type should be ranked at the lower end of the league tables, it begins by making, rather than doing this, it begins by making the range of profiles visible first, and only then comparing universities with similar or largely similar profiles. Rather than comparing all types of fruit in one overall approach, this mapping approach compares apples with apples and oranges with oranges. This is called mapping. It aims to portray the specific activity profiles of individual institutions in a number of profile dimensions. And the tool is called UMAP and has been developed to allow the creation and analysis of these profiles, offering snapshots, photographs if you want, of an institution's activities on different dimensions. UMAP has 6 dimensions, and sets of indicators have been developed for each of those 6 dimensions. A profile, as described in this tool, UMAP, reflects those areas where a university is active, and it indicates the intensity of activities per dimension. The UMAP profile of Maastricht University looks like this. And this profile shows that the University of Maastricht has a strong profile in teaching and learning. This is dark blue in this slide, as well as in research, which is red here. And it's extremely active in terms of international orientation, which is yellow here. So Maastricht University rightfully presents itself as an international research-intensive university that is leading in learning. The UMAP database, there are a large number of institutions in that database, allows us to find universities that are comparable to the Maastricht profile. So I've put a few on this slide here. A few European universities with profiles strongly resembling Maastricht's profile are the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, which is a well-known and highly reputed Swiss university. Telecom Bretagne, which is one of France's most prestigious grande écoles, and the University of Southern Denmark, which is a merged university in Odense, Denmark. In the Dutch university system, the University of Groningen and Nijmegen appear to have profiles that are rather similar to Maastricht. And to a lesser extent, this also goes for Erasmus University Rotterdam and the University of Tilburg. The point I'd like to stress is that comparing the performances of universities with similar profiles is far more interesting and I think useful than ranking universities with a wide variety of different profiles. Ladies and gentlemen, the Dutch university system, it was already alluded to by your president, may be judged to be one of the best in the world. All Dutch universities, with the exception of the Open University, but that has a special position in the system, are to be found indeed among the top 500 universities of the world. If we accept for a moment, and there is criticism as I tried to show, but if we accept for a moment that the choices of the indicators and the methods that are used in the Shanghai ranking and in the Times Higher Education ranking are worthwhile, we can, based on those data in these rankings, make a ranking of the best university systems in the world. And that's what I've done here, using the Shanghai ranking and the Times Higher Education ranking by calculating the ratio of the number of a country's universities in a ranking divided by the total number of universities in that country. And the table shows, I think, that the Dutch university system is one of the best, if not the best, in the world. The Dutch university system indeed is an academic mountain plateau, as one of our former Minister of Education would say, with some smaller peaks here and there, but that, however, those peaks do not reach the heights of the giant academic summits of some of the universities in the US and in the UK. A crucial question, as far as I'm concerned, of course, is whether our university system can remain at this high level of international performance and quality, or whether we should expect that our position will weaken over the years to come. The most recent Shanghai ranking, 2012, seems indeed to suggest that we are losing some ground to international competition. We should keep in mind that this competition worldwide is strong and that many governments worldwide are trying to make sure that their universities will operate at the cutting edge of intellectual and scientific development and will be able to compete at a global scale. So how could the future of global, worldwide higher education look? Allow me to give you one future scenario of the worldwide higher education system. This scenario was developed recently with some 100 university presidents during a long meeting in Chicago, presidents from all over the world. And the scenario shows, as I'm trying to show you here, the following types of universities. A small top echelon of about 50 or so, mainly standalone, highly prestigious, highly resourced, comprehensive universities. That's one layer. Then a number of international consortia of a next group of about 100 to 200 universities, sharing resources, offering joint and mutually accredited programs and degrees. Then a range of niche institutions, specialized institutions with specializations in a few fields of research and education. And then a great diversity of primarily local and regional teaching institutions. And finally, a set of high-tech, primarily virtual, global teaching providers. Whether such a scenario will appear to be true or not is not so much the point. What I would like to underline is that in any national higher education system, the continued international competition for knowledge and talent leads to some crucial challenges for higher education and research policies. Let me mention the two most obvious policy challenges. First, it should be clear that the major implication of the current international developments in higher education and research is that it is no longer enough for higher education policy to be nationally referenced. In the context of the increasing international competition for talent, the need for scale in contemporary research, because of all these reasons, many countries now are intensifying their investments in their leading universities. Not so yet, unfortunately, in the Netherlands. But a country that wants to stay involved in the global competition for knowledge creation processes cannot afford to ignore the international position and reputation of its universities and research institutions. Secondly, a second implication is that a narrow focus on strengthening only the top universities will not be sufficient to meet the wider national and regional innovation needs in any country. For governments, the policy challenge is not only whether to create or sustain elite university strength, although this is certainly an issue, but also how to balance that aim against other aspects of the national interest. In addition to top-level research in any national higher education system, there should also be status and prestige attached to teaching well, to developing graduates for professional practice, to translating research into application, and to contributing to regional development. But no university can do everything. Mission overload. So higher education and research policies are more effective if they permit some institutions to do a few things very well, rather than having them all doing a lot of things only reasonably well. In an increasing number of countries over the last 10 years, also in Europe, there has been a noticeable shift of policy attention to the structure of higher education systems and to the profiles of the institutions that make up these systems. The slide here shows you a number of examples. I will not go into all the details of these examples. There are far more details in the printed version of this presentation. But let me simply draw the conclusion from this list of examples of countries and policies in higher education that the new perspective in higher education policy in the Western world is clearly one of structure and of the variety of institutional profiles making up that structure of the higher education system. And as I said before, the Dutch higher education and research system certainly belongs to the better systems in the world. Dutch higher education institutions rightfully enjoy a large autonomy, and Dutch universities still generally score well in international academic performance rankings. But will we be able to hold on to our position now that other countries have intensified their national higher education policies, also financially, in order to compete better internationally? So in the final part of this presentation, I'll explore quickly two issues. First, the question, will a Dutch university or a consortium of universities be able to reach the very top in terms of the best academic institutions worldwide? And secondly, what is the future for the Dutch higher education system from an international perspective? First, will a Dutch university, or perhaps a consortium of universities, be able to reach the top 25 or so of the best academic research-intensive universities worldwide? What I did is, to be able to answer this question, I undertook a quick and very general analysis of some of the characteristics of a number of the world's best universities. From the various international rankings that I just showed you, I took the sample of 25 universities from various parts of the world, US, Canada, Japan, Australia, China, Europe, of course, making sure that the highest scoring universities were included in the sample. And to this sample, I added all Dutch universities, with the exception of the Open University. Then I had 38 universities, and I compared these on a number of issues. I compared their total enrollment numbers, the size of the student body, their total annual revenues, their income, and I calculated the annual revenue level per student, assuming that this is a good indicator for the academic investment capacity of a university. And that I compared with the scores on scientific impact, as measured by the mean normalized citation impact score, which is the average number of citations of a university normalized for field, publication year, and document type, and of course, for size of the institution. I have a table here, which I'm sure you cannot see, which offers an overview of that sample, ranked according to the criterion of scientific impact, and MIT is number 1 here. So you cannot see, I'm sorry about this, the details of all this, and this is also not important, there is even a second part. But what I would like to assure you is that this table clearly shows that there are very large differences between universities worldwide in terms of their volume, the size of the student body, and income, their annual revenues. But it also shows that the larger and richer universities do not necessarily have the high scientific impact scores. As you can see here, this is a regression analysis, there is, on the other hand, a relationship between annual revenue per student and impact score. The universities that have a high level of annual revenue per student, income therefore, generally speaking, score higher on scientific impact. Larger annual budgets for universities, however they are created, whether through more public funding or through higher tuition fees or through mergers or otherwise, combined with modest student enrollment levels, lead to higher scientific impact score and higher academic reputation. This allows us, I think, to explore the potential of a specific university to climb the international ladder of scientific impact and academic strengths. I give you 2 quick examples. In 2004, in the United Kingdom, the Victoria University of Manchester and the Manchester University of Science and Technology merged to become the University of Manchester, with the stated ambition to become among the 25 world-class universities by the year 2015. And in order to reach that goal, £80 million were invested in that new university. And now, the University of Manchester finds itself at 38th position in the Shanghai ranking, up from 53 in 2005. It certainly has climbed that ladder. Another example can be taken from the Danish university system. For one of the recently merged also universities in Denmark, the University of Copenhagen, I again calculated the annual revenue level per student in 2006, before the merger took place, and in 2011, after the merger. And I again compared that to their Shanghai ranking positions. And these Shanghai rankings position clearly shows progress from 56th position in 2006 to 40th in 2012, well above any Dutch university. Both cases, I argue, show that a clever merger strategy may create an academically stronger institution, if that is your objective. In Denmark, the crucial element in the merger strategy appears to have been the fact that independent research institutes also got involved in the merger activities, and they helped, of course, to create larger research volumes in the new universities without necessarily increasing student numbers. In our country, as you may know, there is now some discussion about a closer and a deeper collaboration between the 2 universities in Amsterdam, the Amsterdam Academic Alliance it is called, as well as between the University of Leiden, Delft and Rotterdam. According to my analysis that I just presented here, I argue that it should not be expected that collaborations like that will automatically produce institutions capable of dramatically increasing their science impact or their academic reputation. Both initiatives, Amsterdam and in South Holland, will lead to very large institutions, the size of the University of Toronto or so, but still with relatively modest budgets. Their annual revenue levels per student will barely increase, and therefore we should not expect, I think, that they will easily rise to join the top 25 universities worldwide. The only way for a Dutch university to reach the top levels in the rankings through a merger strategy is to increase investment levels, particularly in research, while at the same time limiting student enrollment numbers. From this point, I suggest, as the Danish experience shows, that mergers between universities and autonomous non-university research institutes, NWO, KNW instituten, may be far more effective than mergers between universities. This brings me to my final question. What is the future of our higher education system in the international context? As you know, the Dutch higher education system is a binary system with research universities on the one side of the divide and mainly teaching universities, HBO institutions, on the other side of the divide. Institutional profiling has begun in the Netherlands on both sides of the divide, and we can expect that the various institutional profiles of our universities and HBO institutions will become more clearly defined in the years to come. However, what is still lacking in our Dutch higher education system is any discussion about its overall structure. We appear to be satisfied with our binary system, and we are unwilling, apparently, to address the issues of differences between institutions in terms of their mission, their performances, their reputation, and their quality. In the Netherlands, the notion of system structure is barely addressed. System-level analyses of the Dutch higher education system seem to be a taboo in Dutch higher education and are quickly associated with unnecessary grand visions and, of course, too much government regulation. But our country, I argue, cannot avoid assessing the effectiveness and efficiency of its higher education system as a whole. While other countries move forward in their strategies with respect to their higher education and research systems, the Netherlands cannot simply wait and see and assume that we will automatically end up among the top 5 of the world's knowledge economies, because we will not. As I've indicated, several countries have embarked upon policies to create further differentiation in their higher education systems in order to create the best possible output in terms of knowledge and human capital. In several countries now, steps are being taken to create one or a limited number of research-focused universities of high international standing, while at the same time stimulating other institutions to provide quality education for regional and national development purposes. In those countries, higher education policies are first of all policies now about system structure and then about the diversity of missions and roles of the various institutions that collectively make up these higher education systems. If we want to keep up with international competition, we need to have a fresh, objective look at the Dutch system of higher education and research as a whole. Do we have the best set of institutional profiles in the context of global competition for talent and knowledge? Do we have the best range of profiles in order to further develop our knowledge economy? Do we have the best possible spread and critical mass of research units and infrastructures? Do we want to create, or do we dare to create, 1 or 2 universities of high international standing while stimulating the remaining universities to develop different profiles? Are we spending our resources as well as we can? Do we provide sufficient diverse teaching programs to train a growing diversity of learners? Do we attract, this university certainly does so, do we attract the appropriate level and volume of international talent? These and similar questions, ladies and gentlemen, need to be addressed not only at the level of higher education institutions, but also in terms of the overall higher education and research system. Now that we in the Netherlands have taken the first steps of designing and discussing university profiles, we should be bold enough to take the next step as well, to analyze our system as a whole. We still have an internationally lauded higher education system. Let us try to keep it up to at least the current levels of performance and effectiveness. Thank you for your attention.